The moment I walked through the front doors of the Ritz-Crest banquet hall, a man in a security blazer stepped directly into my path and told me the catering staff entrance was around the back. I looked at him. He looked at me. I was wearing a cream wool coat, not a uniform. I had a gift bag in my hand. I was a guest, but I didn't say any of that. I just smiled, thanked him, and walked around to the side entrance like he suggested. Because here's the thing, that banquet hall, I owned it. And I thought, well, this is going to be a very interesting evening. My younger sister had been planning this engagement party for 4 months. 4 months of phone calls I mostly let go to voicemail. 4 months of her forwarding me vendor spreadsheets and asking for my opinion on centerpiece colors. 4 months of my mother forwarding me those same spreadsheets with little notes that said, please just respond. She stressed. I had responded. I said, looks great, and whatever you think, and I trust you. And I meant all of it. My sister has an eye for these things. She was organized, detail-oriented, determined. I was proud of her. What I was less thrilled about was the way she'd been describing me to her fiancé's family. I'd pieced it together in bits and pieces over the last few weeks. A comment here, a hesitation there. She told them I did something in real estate, which was technically true, the way it's technically true that someone who owns a chain of bakeries does something with flour. She told them I was pretty quiet, not really social. Also technically true, depending on what you mean by social. She told them I was between things professionally, which was not true at all. I think she just didn't want to explain. I understood it, sort of. Her fiancé's family was old money, third generation, Vancouver Island. They had opinions, his mother especially. I'd heard enough about her to recognize the type before I ever met her. A woman who categorized people within the first 30 seconds and then spent the rest of the evening confirming her initial read. I didn't want to make my sister's life complicated, so I hadn't pushed back on any of it. That was probably my first mistake. The second mistake was wearing the cream coat instead of something with more obvious signals. Because when I finally found my way through the side corridor and into the main hall, the first person I made eye contact with was my future brother-in-law's mother, Cecile. She was a tall woman with silver hair pulled into a sculptural updo and a way of looking at people that made you feel like you'd just been assessed for resale value. She clocked my coat, then my shoes, which were admittedly simple. I'd worn flats because I knew I'd be on my feet. Then she looked at my gift bag. You must be Lee's sister, she said in a tone that conveyed she'd already been warned. I am, I said. It's lovely to meet you. She gave me the two-cheek air kiss that people do when they don't actually want to touch you. And then she turned to the woman standing next to her, a friend of hers, early 60s, wearing approximately $20,000 worth of jewelry, and said, very quietly but not quietly enough, that's the one who dabbles in property. Dabbles. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and went to find my seat. The hall looked beautiful, I'll say that. My sister had done an extraordinary job. She'd chosen deep green and gold, which worked perfectly with the exposed brick walls, and the floral arrangements were extravagant in a way that still felt restrained. I knew those flowers. I knew the florist we contracted through, because I'd approved the vendor list for the entire venue 3 years ago. My table was at the back, not in an obvious way. It was framed as the family side, which is technically an honor, except that the family side was also where they'd put the coat racks, so every 20 minutes someone would shuffle past behind me and I'd get a brief draft of November air. My sister found me before the appetizers came out. She looked the way she always does at events she's organized. Beautiful and slightly frantic, glancing at the room while she's talking to you. You made it, she said, hugging me. Of course. Did you meet Cecile? Briefly. She searched my face for signs of damage. She can be a lot. Just ignore it. She's fine once you get to know her. I nodded. The room looks incredible, by the way. That landed the way I meant it to. Her whole body relaxed for a second. Yeah. The lighting especially. Did you end up going with the warm whites? 2700 Kelvin, she said and smiled. You actually noticed. I always notice. She squeezed my hand and went back to being the hostess. I ate my arugula salad and watched the room. The thing about owning a venue is that you never fully stop seeing it as a venue. I was tracking things I couldn't help tracking. The way the servers were moving between tables, whether the bar had enough backup staff for the late hour rush, if the kitchen timing was going to hold. I'd been in and out of this location a dozen times for operational reviews, but tonight I was just a guest, and I was trying to actually be a guest, which was harder than it sounds. The appetizers came out, then they were recalled. I noticed the head server, a young man named, according to his name tag, Tobias, making 2 separate trips to the kitchen in under 5 minutes, with a look on his face that I recognized as the controlled panic of someone trying to fix a problem before anyone notices there is one. About 10 minutes later, my sister appeared at Tobias's elbow, speaking in a low, urgent voice. The menu had been changed, again. I learned this from the woman seated next to me, who had also apparently heard it from someone else. My future sister-in-law's college friend, who had an audible voice and no particular filter, leaned across the table and explained the situation. Cecile had decided at some point between the original tasting 4 months ago and this actual evening that the original menu was too casual for an event of this caliber and had communicated a revised version to my sister, except she'd communicated it in an email my sister hadn't seen until 2 days ago, and the kitchen had already ordered product for the original selections. There had been 3 subsequent revisions after that. The kitchen was currently operating on what was apparently draft number 4 of what Cecile considered the appropriate menu for her son's engagement party at a venue she had not paid for and had not organized. Tobias was handling it with more grace than I would have. I flagged him down on his next pass. Hey, I said quietly, just from where I'm sitting. You're doing a great job. He looked slightly startled, then composed himself. Thank you. We're walking through it. I know, I said. Is the kitchen holding? He paused for just a fraction of a second, the kind of pause that means someone is deciding whether to be honest or polished. They're adapting, he said carefully. I nodded. He moved on. Cecile, meanwhile, was 3 tables away and appeared to be on excellent form. She'd gathered a small audience. Her jewelry-wearing friend, 2 of her son's university colleagues, a cousin who'd flown in from Halifax, and she was explaining, loudly and with considerable warmth, the difference between venues that could handle a proper event and venues that were charming for what they are. I took a long sip of my water. Charming for what they are meant fine for someone like your family, but don't ask me to be impressed. My mother, who was seated 2 tables over with my aunt and 2 family friends, caught my eye across the room. She gave me the look she's been giving me my entire life. That means, let it go. I love her. I love her. I let it go. For about 40 more minutes, I let it go. The main course came out, the adapted version, which I have to say the kitchen pulled off beautifully given the circumstances. The salmon was properly cooked. The wild rice was good. Tobias had managed the timing. I made a mental note to make sure he was recognized for it. Then Cecile stood up. It was just before dessert, and she stood up at her table without anyone having asked her to, tapped her champagne flute, and began to speak. She had a prepared toast, apparently. Handwritten notes on a small card that she held with the confidence of someone who assumed the room would be grateful. She spoke about her son for 3 minutes. She spoke about her family's history in the region for 4 minutes. She made a comment about how happy they were that he'd finally found someone, a word choice that landed with a small, awkward ripple across the tables where my sister's friends were sitting. Then she looked at my sister and said something about how they were looking forward to welcoming her into a family with certain standards, and that she hoped my sister would find the right guidance for managing a household of that kind. The room was very quiet. My sister was smiling, the specific smile she uses when she's holding something in. Cecile sat back down, looking satisfied. Her jewelry friend leaned over and whispered something that made Cecile laugh. Then something happened that I hadn't expected. Cecile's husband, a quiet, silver-haired man named Roger, who had said approximately 11 words across the entire evening, reached into the breast pocket of his jacket, produced a small USB drive, and slid it across the table to his wife. She glanced at it. Something shifted in her expression. Not publicly, she controlled it, but I'd been watching her all evening, and I saw it. She tucked it into her evening bag. I didn't know what was on it, but I noted it. The way you note things when you spent enough time in business to know that people who produce USB drives at dinner parties are generally not producing photo slideshows. I found out later from my sister crying in the coat check room after the dessert plates were cleared. Cecile had been building a case for the last 6 weeks. Financial documents mostly, screenshots of property records and incorporation filings, a credit report that Roger had obtained through some questionable channel, and a note in Cecile's handwriting that laid out what she considered to be evidence that my sister's family, meaning me, specifically, did not have the financial standing she'd been led to expect. She'd been planning to show this to her son. The goal, as far as I could understand it from my sister's account, was to give him what Cecile called the full picture before the marriage moved forward, specifically the picture that showed my sister's family as people without the kind of assets that would, in Cecile's phrase, complement theirs. I sat with my sister in the coat check room while she cried, and I handed her the small packet of tissues I keep in my coat pocket, and I thought very carefully about what I was going to do next. She's going to show him, my sister said. She's going to show him, and he's going to think my whole family is, hey, I said. Look at me. She looked at me. What exactly did she say you told them about what I do? My sister winced. I said you did some real estate stuff. Investments. I didn't want to make it weird. Okay, I said. I need you to trust me. And I need you to go back out there and keep smiling for about 15 more minutes. She stared at me. What are you going to do? Nothing dramatic, I said. Which was mostly true. I went back into the hall and I found Tobias. I asked him, quietly, to let the event manager on duty know that I was in the building and that I'd like a brief word at the back of the room when he had a moment. Tobias didn't ask why. I think by that point in the evening, he'd sensed something was off, and he was the kind of professional who trusted his instincts. The event manager, a capable woman in her early 40s who'd been managing this location for 2 years, appeared at my elbow within 4 minutes. Her name was Danielle, and when she saw who had flagged her, she went a little still in the way that people do when they weren't expecting to see their employer standing by the dessert table. I didn't know you were here tonight, she said, keeping her voice low. I'm here as a guest, I said, but I need a few minutes at the front, if you can arrange it. She nodded. She knew how to read a situation. The hall had a small raised platform at the front, nothing formal, just a step up near the bar where speakers could be heard without shouting. Danielle found a way to get the room's attention and cue a microphone without making it seem like anything unusual was happening. I walked up. The room settled. Cecile, from her table, watched me with an expression that was politely neutral and very slightly amused. The sister of the bride, apparently getting up to make a toast. How sweet. Good evening, I said. For those of you I haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm Lee's older sister. I've been looking forward to this evening for a long time, and I want to say everything looks exactly as it should, because Lee has genuinely extraordinary taste. She planned every detail of what you're seeing tonight. Remember that. A warm murmur. My sister, from her seat, was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I also want to say something on behalf of the venue, I said. I've been watching the team here work all night through some last-minute changes, and they've handled everything with professionalism and grace. Specifically Tobias, who I'd like everyone to give a round of applause to, because he's been quietly holding this evening together. Tobias, who was near the back, looked like he wanted to evaporate. The room clapped. A few people near his station smiled at him. Now, I said, and I let the word land for just a moment. I should probably introduce myself properly. My name is Sloane. Oh, wait. I paused and smiled. That was my sister's name that had slipped out in my head. Sorry. I've been introducing myself as my sister's sister all night. I'm Iris. Lee's older sister, Iris. I set my champagne glass down on the edge of the platform. I own this building. The room did the thing rooms do when something registers all at once. Not loud, just a collective small shift. People glancing at each other. A few heads turning towards Cecile. Cecile's expression did not change. She was too composed for that. But her hand, resting on the table, moved very slightly. I own this building and about a dozen other properties in the lower mainland and the island, I said, still in the same easy tone I'd been using to talk about the lighting and the flowers. I've been doing that for about 8 years. I keep a reasonably low profile about it because I find that people treat you differently when they know, and I prefer to know how people actually behave. Tonight has been very informative on that front. I paused. I want Cecile to know, I said, that whatever research she's been doing into my family's finances, I'd encourage her to check the public incorporation filings under Meridian Property Group and its subsidiaries. That will give her a more complete picture than whatever she's been working from. The jewelry friend had gone very still. Roger was looking at the tablecloth. Cecile, to her enormous credit, did not look away from me. I'll give her that. She held eye contact. Whatever she was feeling, she didn't let it show. I love my sister, I said. I have loved her entire life. She is kind and sharp, and she has organized the most beautiful engagement party I have ever attended, at a venue that I feel I should mention. She chose without knowing I owned it, because she has excellent taste and doesn't need my help to make good decisions. I looked at my sister, who was pressing her hand over her mouth. The bar is open, the dessert is coming out, and I believe the kitchen has put together something that is significantly better than what was originally planned, so let's all enjoy it. I stepped down. The room broke into applause, genuine, slightly stunned, the kind that comes when people are also processing something they've just witnessed. I walked back to my table, sat down, and picked up my fork. My mother appeared at my elbow approximately 90 seconds later. Iris, she said under her breath. Mom. Was that necessary? I considered it. The USB drive was necessary, I said. I just wanted to get ahead of it. She sat down in the empty seat next to me and stared at her hands for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, she was going to show it to him tonight. I know. How did you know? I've dealt with people like her before, I said. They don't keep things like that in their bag unless they're planning to use them soon. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she patted my hand and went back to her table. Cecile left before dessert was served. Roger went with her, walking 2 steps behind in the way that made me think he spent a lot of his life doing that. Her jewelry friend stayed. I noticed she had a second piece of the hazelnut tart and laughed loudly at something someone said, which is what some people do when they're recalibrating. My sister's fiancé, for his part, had been sitting very still since I stepped off the platform. He was a quiet man. I'd met him twice before, and both times I thought he seemed genuinely decent, which is a thing I don't say about many people. He came to find me about 20 minutes after Cecile left. He sat down across from me. I want to apologize, he said, for my mother, and for the fact that I should have pushed back harder when she started asking questions about your family. I looked at him. Did you know about the USB? No, he said, and I believed him. I knew she'd been asking around. I thought I'd talked her out of it. You didn't. No. He was quiet for a moment. I love Lee. I want you to know that this isn't going to affect anything. It better not, I said, without any particular heat. Because she'd be fine without you, just so we're clear. But I think you probably know that. He nodded. You should talk to her, I said. Not me. He nodded again and went to find her. I sat for a while after that, watching the room settle back into something closer to what it was supposed to be. The music came on. A few people danced. Tobias and his team cleared the plates with the smooth efficiency of people who'd been through worse evenings and come out the other side. Danielle came by to check in. "How are we doing?" she asked. "Well," I said, "really well. Tell the kitchen they did an excellent job with the adaptation. Genuinely." "I will." She hesitated. "The security guard from the front, the one at the main entrance. He's been made aware of the situation. Don't fire him," I said, but a reminder about how to assess a situation before redirecting a guest would be appropriate. "Understood. And Tobias should be flagged for the next team lead opening if there is one." She smiled. "Already noted." After the party wound down, after my sister hugged me for a long time in the lobby and didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say, after my mother kissed my cheek and told me I was a lot sometimes in the way that meant she was proud of me, I stayed behind to walk through the hall the way I always do after events. It's a habit I picked up years ago before I had staff to do it for me. I just walk the room, check what's left, see if anything needs attention. The caterers had packed up the surplus food hours earlier. I'd made sure of that before dessert. Coordinated with Danielle to have the extra prepared items boxed up and sent to a shelter on East Hastings that we'd worked with before. The flowers, Lee's extraordinary green and gold flowers, were going to a care home in Burnaby the next morning. The florist had arranged it when I called them at 7 that evening before the party started because I'd had a feeling things might go sideways and I didn't want anything wasted. Nothing got wasted. I stood in the middle of the empty hall for a moment, just listening to it be quiet. The lighting was still warm, 2700 Kelvin. My sister had been right about that. I turned off the last display lights on my way out, and I used the front door.